All right, let's talk about Android Room. If you've ever built an Android app, you've probably had to save some data, right? Maybe it's user settings, a to-do list, whatever. That's data persistence. And let's be honest, it can get messy. Well, today we're going to break down how Room, which is Google's official library, takes all that complexity and makes it simple, powerful, and dare I say, actually kind of fun to use.
So what is Android Room, really? I love this subtitle, From Boilerplate to Bliss. Because, to really get why it's so great, you kind of have to understand the pain it solves. Before Room came along, trying to talk to the local database on an Android device, well, it felt like you were wrestling with this huge, tangled mess of code. Let's take a look at what that was actually like.
And wow, this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? On the left, that's the before picture. It was just a nightmare. We had to manually manage all these low-level things, write mountains of boilerplate, which is just that repetitive code you have to type over and over. But the worst part, there was absolutely no safety net. If you had one tiny typo in your SQL query, your app would just crash. Boom. But then look at the right. That's the world with Room. It's clean. It checks our code as we write it, so we catch mistakes instantly. And we get to work with simple, clean data objects. The main takeaway here is simple. Less code just means fewer bugs.
So, the magic behind all this has a name. It's called an Object-Relational Mapper, or ORM for short. And this slide shows you exactly what it does. It's a bridge. On one side, you have your nice, familiar Kotlin objects that you work with every day. On the other side, you've got the relational database speaking its own language of tables and columns. The ORM, in our case, Room, is the bridge that connects these two worlds, so you never have to deal with the raw, complex database commands. Okay, so how does Room actually build this amazing bridge? The really beautiful thing about it is how simple it is. It's all built on just 3 core components. I like to think of them as the 3 pillars that hold up the entire system. Once you get these 3, you totally get Room. And where they are, it's a really clear flow. First up, you have the entity, which is basically the blueprint for your data. Then you have the DAO, which is like the key that gives you access to that data. And finally, you have the database, which is the big container that holds everything together. Let's break down each one real quick. First up, the entity. Seriously, this is as simple as it gets. It's just a normal Kotlin data class. You take that class, you slap an @entity annotation on top, and boom! Room now knows that this class represents a table in your database. Every property in that class becomes a column in the table, and every time you create an object from that class, it represents a new row. Easy. Next is the DAO, which stands for Data Access Object. This is just an interface where you define all the things you want to do with your data. You don't write the code, you just declare the methods. Want to get some data? You write a method and put @query on it. Need to add something new? Use @insert. If you've ever used the retrofit library for making network calls, this is going to feel almost exactly the same. And the final pillar, the one that ties it all together, is the database class itself. Think of this as the main hub. It's an abstract class where you list out all of your entities, all your tables, and provide access to your DAOs. It's the one single entry point for your entire database. All right, so we've got the pieces. Now for the fun part. Let's see what happens when we put them to work, because this is where we see Room's real power unleashed, handling background work and making our data reactive. This is honestly one of the biggest headaches in all of mobile development, and Room just solves it beautifully. Okay, if you've ever touched Room, I guarantee you've seen this error. And you know what? It's a good thing. Room is actually protecting you from yourself. It knows that doing slow database stuff on the main UI thread, the one that your user is interacting with, will freeze your app and create a horrible experience. So Room just says, nope, not going to let you do that. Think of it as a safety feature, not a bug. So how do you get around that error? Well, the old-fashioned way was to manage it all yourself. You'd write a function that just returns a list of your data, but then it was on you to manually create a background thread and run that function there. It was a ton of extra work and honestly, super easy to mess up.
But this is where the magic happens. Watch this. Instead of returning a simple list, all you do is change the return type to a Kotlin flow. That's it. You change one word. With that single change, Room takes care of everything for you. The query automatically runs on a background thread so your UI never freezes. And even better, it becomes reactive. That means you don't have to keep asking for new data anymore. Whenever the data in the database changes, Room pushes the new updated list to you automatically. It's an absolute game changer.
All right, storing simple stuff like text and numbers, that's easy. But let's be real. Real-world data is way more complex than that. So let's look at how Room elegantly handles some of these trickier situations.
So you're probably thinking, okay, that's great for strings and numbers, but what about something like a date object? Or what if I have a list of tags for a note? SQLite, the database underneath, has no idea what those things are. So what do we do?
The answer is something called a type converter. And really, it's just you teaching Room a new trick. All you have to do is write two super simple functions. The first one tells Room how to take your custom object, like a date, and turn it into something simple that SQLite understands, like a long. The second function just does the reverse. You write these once, tell Room about them, and it just works everywhere.
Okay, so type converters are awesome for that one-to-one swap. But what if you have a property that is itself an object with its own fields? For example, imagine you have a location object that contains both a latitude and a longitude. A simple type converter isn't going to work here because we want to store those as two separate columns in our table. For that, Room gives us this awesome little annotation, @embedded. You just put that on your location property, and Room will basically flatten it. It treats the fields inside that location class, latitude and longitude, as if they were declared as columns directly in your main table. It just works seamlessly.
Look, writing the code is only half the battle, right? A huge part of being a modern developer is having great tools that let you actually see what's going on under the hood. And Room's integration into Android Studio is frankly amazing.
And this is where things get really cool. Check this out. This is the Database Inspector, a tool that's built right into Android Studio. While your app is running on your device or emulator, you can pop this open and get a live, real-time look inside your database. You can see all the tables, click through the rows, and double-check that your data is being saved exactly how you expect. And it gets even better. See that little Live Updates checkbox? Oh man, this is where the magic really happens. When you tick that box, the inspector will automatically refresh itself every single time your app makes a change to the data. You can tap a button in your app and literally watch the new row appear in this table. For debugging, this is an absolute lifesaver. So when you put it all together, it becomes super clear why Room is the standard on Android now. It cuts out a massive amount of boilerplate code. It saves you from embarrassing runtime crashes by checking your SQL when you compile. It plugs right into modern reactive code with things like Flow, and the tooling is just fantastic. It just makes your life as a developer so much easier.
At the end of the day, Room isn't just a database library. It's really an enabler. It gets all the boring, complex, and error-prone stuff out of your way so that you can focus on what actually matters, building amazing, data-driven features for your users. So we'll just leave you with this final thought. With all this power at your fingertips, what are you going to build next?